Good morning. This morning I'm talking about solemnity and improvement. Let me begin the talk by just mentioning our understanding of the word solemnity. First of all, just delete, eradicate any definition that you were taught as you were growing up, particularly church definitions. So you're going to learn today a whole new definition of the word solemnity. If you look in Webster's dictionary or the Catholic definition of terms, you're going to look at the word in the definition of solemnity and say, why is she talking about solemnity this morning? It's because I'm not taking the old traditional definition to talk about. The old traditional definition has to do with, as I understand it, one of the highest ceremonies that a Catholic church can present to its parishioners. It also is a definition of behavior of certain ceremonies. It's also frequently referred to as the solemnity. So I'm not going to be speaking that way this morning. I'm going to be approaching this beautiful term through the understanding of Agni Yoga. And I think you're going to see that it's going to be a whole different experience, a whole different level of understanding. So I'm going to be sharing what the Agni Yoga books have to say about solemnity, and then also Nicholas Rourke, because he brings a whole new and beautiful image of what solemnity is by infusing joy. See, when we think of the term solemnity and the behavior of a person who's practicing solemnity, you have perhaps the image of dignity, a person who is not smiling ever, and so forth. So he brings in another image. So I'm going to start with a quote from the book Heart. Heart is from the Agni Yoga series, and it's from verse 71. True solemnity is built in the highest tension. So that's the first thing to think about, solemnity. It's built in the highest tension. So what does the highest tension mean? Well, I'll be talking a little bit about it this morning, but this is something to put into your own mental glossary and think about. Now, solemnity can only be built in the highest tension. So what is that telling us? That's telling us perhaps that this is the kingpin of virtue, of a person expressing solemnity, is expressing one of the finest, the highest frequency of a virtue that there may be. True solemnity is built in the highest tension. It goes on to say, solemnity is not rest. It is not satisfaction. It is not the end, but precisely the beginning, precisely determination, and progress on the way to light. So that tells us that solemnity, in fact, is an action. It's an action word for spiritual people, particularly if you're on the path of Agni Yoga or any spiritual path that puts demands and disciplines into your life in such a way that it expands your soul and increases the light of your soul. Solemnity is a word of action that Agni yogis engage in. This verse indicates that solemnity is one of the first requirements for those who are striving for illumination. That solemnity is needed for determination and also for success as you strive for illumination. So this tells us right away that for those who are on the path of discipleship, that the act of solemnity is vital to your behavior, inside and out. So now I'm going to give you kind of a litany of definitions from the teaching of this word. Solemnity means that mentally, emotionally, physically, with your thoughts and words and with your actions, you will always try to live in the presence of God. So for some of us, we might want to narrow that down a little bit because God is such a universal, all-encompassing experience. So for myself, I will narrow that down to living in the presence of the Master, living in presence of the teacher, living in the presence of Sanakamara. And that helps to make it a little bit more practical for me. The next is this. It is freedom from light-mindedness, freedom from hilarity, freedom from irresponsible expressions. See how that's a different definition from the practice of a ceremony, a religious ceremony? This is so different. It is freedom from light-mindedness, from hilarity and irresponsible expressions. The next. It is the ability to dwell and remain in the presence of your inner guide and in the presence of the Master. To remain in the presence of the Master. What does this mean to us? This is telling us you can't just stand in front of a great illumined being and not experience an effect, and not experience permission to stand there unless we are in the aura of the expression of solemnity. The reason this is so right and so important to understand is that when you're in the presence of an illumined being, everything within your nature is combustible. The Master will understand if you have a lot of combustible material still, in your mechanical expressions, that it is not yet time. You are not yet ready to stand in the presence of a great one. So, when we're told from the teaching, it is solemnity is the ability to remain in the presence of the Master. It means you are qualified. And solemnity qualifies you to be that, to have that ability. The next, it is one of the main virtues which puts you in contact with the cosmic magnet. This is solemnity. To put you in contact with the cosmic magnet. That doesn't mean, okay, I have read 25 pages of definitions of what the cosmic magnet is. I know where the cosmic magnet is positioned in the sky. Okay, well, that's great. I remember somebody reading one of my books, a chapter in my book that talks about the cosmic magnet, and she said, I've never heard of that before. It's okay not to have ever heard about it before. What is important is to be in contact. then you don't have to read anything more about it. You just know what the cosmic magnet is and what it does. It is also the realization of the seriousness and importance of the moment. So, when you're in a situation that is significant, that the moment is significant, that's the time that you're going to realize the importance of this event. The first time you meet the teacher, I'll never forget the first time that I met a real teacher. That was a moment of solemnity. I will never forget it. You will never forget the moment you met your teacher. You will never forget it. That's a moment of solemnity. The realization of the seriousness of the moment. That's solemnity. Some people have never had that experience. They talk about the movies that they went to over the weekend, or they talk about their book club and how important this, bestseller on the book list of the New York Times was that they discussed at the book club meeting. That's not the experience of the realization of the importance of the moment. One of solemnity is one who walks in his presence. Not only your physical walking, but in your emotional and mental walking as well. This is the discipline of discipleship. So solemnity is in concurrence, is that the right word? Is in concurrence with discipleship? I'm not sure, but it sounds like it works for me. Okay. Frequently, we emphasize the importance of not only studying the teaching on a daily basis, but once our studies reveal an understanding of its purpose, once the teaching reveals an understanding of the purpose of the teaching, then is when we must begin to apply what we understand. This instruction is very important to all of us, because those who are striving to return to Shambhala, to return to the Father's home, want to progress on the way to light. So if we want to progress on the way to light, practicing solemnity as we're learning these definitions and the significance of solemnity means application. So we first have to understand it, and that's what we're trying to do this morning, is to understand the teaching on a daily basis, studying the teaching on a daily basis. How many people study the teaching on a daily basis? Usually the first 3 months, maybe the first 3 years, we're on fire with the teaching. But wait, 30 years down the road, are you still on fire? Are you still studying those teaching, those books with the passion that you did when you first opened the first page of your first book? Some of us still are. Some of you aren't even opening a book anymore. You've lost your passion. And I truly believe the people who lose their passion is because they read the teaching, but they failed to understand it. And in failing to understand it, they're unable to put it into practice. It's like this new book, 2 of them actually, that were just released, one with on the lotus. If you've been practicing the teaching as a result of your understanding, when you open up that book, it is like opening the first page of the first book you ever read. It's like, wow, this is so exciting because it's taking you to the next level of consciousness. the next level of the teaching, which then produces the next level of an expanded understanding. And this isn't going to happen if, 25 years ago you were passionate, but now it's like, oh hum. Ho hum. See what I'm saying? The more we take the studies of the teaching and develop an understanding, the more we can put it into practice. And the more we put the teaching into practice, the deeper our understanding occurs and eventually puts us right at that place where we are in the presence of the Master. And when you're in the presence of the Master, you have the whole universe to look at as a first page of the first book that you ever read. So let's build a good understanding of solemnity and how and when to apply solemnity in our daily strivings. The verse said that solemnity must be applied at the beginning. This means that we must apply solemnity at the beginning of any important task, of any important decision, and at the beginning of our daily meditation. Nicholas Roerg wrote, and this is from an article he wrote called Maitreya, Peace to All Beings. He wrote, on a piece of palm bark with a sharp stylus, a friendly bhikkhu in writing in Sinhalese. He is writing in Sinhalese. He says in his writing using the stylus, can you imagine? I mean, this was not yesterday, Right, it happened a while ago in another country. Does he molest anyone? Is he writing an appeal? No. With a smile, he is sending a greeting to the far-off lands beyond the seas. A greeting to the good, benevolent people. Benevolent is a key word here. And he does not expect a reply. It is simply a benevolent arrow into space. Think about this. A greeting to the good, benevolent people, and he does not expect a reply. We still, those of us that are still living on this planet, want a reply. We want to pronounce a prayer to God, and we want a response. See? On Messenger, on Facebook, on Twitter. In order for us to have faith and to keep faith, we want a response. Well, we get responses, we just don't know how to see them. And this bhikkhu is saying he doesn't expect a reply. He is simply sending a benevolent arrow out into space. So this writing by Nicholas Roerg gives us an example of solemnity. Roerg believes that solemnity is created from the fountain of benevolence. That's his definition, and I love it. I think it's so beautiful. Solemnity is created from the fountain of benevolence. Nicholas Roerg often referenced solemnity alongside benevolence in his book Heroica and other writings. He also wrote, memorable days in the spiritual, social, and family aspect affirm the solemnity of life. See how different this is? But the teaching is taking us to this much higher gear of this old-fashioned word, solemnity. Again, let me repeat this. He wrote memorable days in a spiritual, social, and family aspect affirm the solemnity of life. People beautify themselves both bodily and spiritually, and as such, a way every day becomes radiantly significant. He's not saying, oh, I'll be so glad to get to the end of this day. He's not writing that at all. He's saying every day becomes radiantly significant. And then the first verse, solemnity is not the end, but precisely the beginning. So they're telling us to start our day with solemnity. Any solemn undertaking, a task, a thought, a decision permeated with solemnity will bring about a transformation and transfiguration of the world. Think of that bhikkhu sending out an arrow of benevolence out into space. And then come back and think about this. Solemnity will bring about a transformation and transfiguration of the world. This is why Agni Yoga focuses the power of thought. This is why daily meditation is so significant in the life of a disciple, because we are sending out arrows of benevolence that will transform and transfigure the world. It will bring about the transformation and transfiguration of the author and the world of humanity. And it will bring about the transformation of the subtle world. Number 2, solemnity is the language of the heart. Because in every human heart, in the entire human kingdom, exists one and the same striving. What is this striving? The one and the same striving in every single human heart, in other words, the entire human kingdom is striving toward the light of Shambhala. They may not call it Shambhala, they may call it heaven or something else. But every human heart is striving to the light of Shambhala, the center where the will of God is known. So solemnity is the language of the heart. See, not Webster's dictionary, not some religion. It's the language of the heart. Number 3, solemnity is an action of nobility. Anyone who engaged in an action that is permeated with solemnity is one who is selfless. We don't know what that is. We might have degrees of knowledge. Torquem is always writing about, if you have 20% of this, then you are 20 degree that. So we may have, let's say that we can be selfless 30% of our day. Then that means that we're practicing 30% of solemnity in our actions and thoughts and words and deeds throughout the day. But our goal is 100%, and in that practice of 100%, we become noble. So anyone who is engaged in an action permeated with solemnity is one who is selfless. So that's our goal, is to be selfless. In other words, decentralized. That's a tough one, to be decentralized, because we've taken many, many, many incarnations to become central. And now we're decentralizing, and that's a tough one. One who lives their life for the good of the whole, not for the best of this little self. For the good of the whole, rather than for the good of one part. Their actions are goal-fitting to the plan of the greater good, the universal good. As if the plan was created and developed in the presence of God. So if you have that ability when you're creating your day-to-day, plan or your year-to-year plan to develop it in the presence of God, then God bless you. Not all of us are there quite yet. Although if we think that God is in everything, then that takes on a different perspective. I realize that. So it depends on our consciousness, I guess. So number 4, true solemnity is built in the highest tension. Isn't that what the verse said? Okay, pardon me. I get allergies the week after allergy season. Anyway, true solemnity built in the highest tension means that solemnity can only be developed in the presence of the Most High. Solemnity is the result of contact with your inner creative center. That's contact with the cosmic magnet. When you are in contact with your innermost creative center is when that creative center is in alignment and resonance with the cosmic magnet. It is the realization of your inner divinity and the process of carrying that realization into all your expressions. This is not an easy task, but it is a vision for us to envision and to work toward it, strive toward it. 5, tension. If tension is created on the higher mental level, the tension expresses itself as heroic action. Striving, self-sacrifice, and intense creativity. I'm going to repeat these expressions of tension. Heroic action is an expression of tension. What is heroic action? It's not giving up your angel food cake for a day. So really think about, gosh, I must have that on somewhere in my subconscious one. Okay, so think about it. What is heroic action? What heroic action means to you? What kind of heroic action have you practiced during the past year? See, and what your action may have been can be different from someone else. It certainly is sacrificial service. Heroic action would be sacrificial service, for one. If tension is created on the higher mental level, then self-sacrifice and intense creativity follows. When the forces of darkness, for example, oppose the higher values and the principles of our life, what are disciples going to do? We have to know these things because it's going to happen. You cannot say, because I'm a light being, I will not be affected by the dark forces, or that my life work, or that my service for the year, or the plan that I developed before I was born is not going to attract the forces of darkness. So you can't, you're ignorant. I was going to say stupid, but that's, ignorant is a better word. That's ignorant to think that the dark forces are not going to attack you. So if the dark forces oppose your higher values and your principles, as a disciple, all disciples will mobilize all of their energies to fight against such violations. They're not going to stand in the periphery and say, oh, wow, I have nothing to do with that. That's her problem. They gather together and fight against such violations. This is an action of solemnity, the highest virtue. Number 6, an image of solemnity. Think this is so beautiful. The Himalayan mountains is an image of solemnity. If you are an artist or enjoy thinking in the abstract, to understand the power of solemnity is to create in your mind an image of the majestic Himalayan mountains. I have such an image in my mind. It is forever stored in a special place in my consciousness. The Kanchenjunga Mountains, which is part of the Himalayan mountain range. The first morning I spent in Darjeeling, India, the first time I was ever outside of the United States, I went to Darjeeling. Some of you know that. I opened the shutters of my room early in the morning to be greeted with the solemnity of the Kanchenjunga Mountains. The very first morning. The exact image of the Mount of the Five Treasures, also called Two Worlds, painted by Nicholas Rourke. That's what I was looking at. The thing is that the majority of the year, the Kanchenjunga Mountains are covered with a continuous cloud cover. So that morning, when I opened up the shutters and looked out at the Kanchenjunga Mountains, the locals said, "This is extraordinary." And it certainly was for myself. So it committed its magnificence to my heart and memory. The Himalayan mountains are permeated with a wealth of legends, which reflects the power of solemnity. They are a symbol for the great seekers of truth. The Himalayan mountains symbolize an image of supreme achievement. Think of Mount Everest. Think of the climbers that were successful and those that died. The Himalayan mountains symbolize an image of supreme achievement. And they symbolize ineffable I can't say that word. Ineffable. It reads well on the paper, you know. It's just trying to verbalize it. It's different language. So they symbolize an ineffable, holy aspiration of which heroes are born. That's the Himalayan mountains legends. In writing about the Himalayan mountains, Nicholas Rourke wrote, "Why does one think of the Himalayas? Why are we seemingly compelled to think of them, remember them, and strive toward them? Because even mental communion with their solemn grandeur provides one of the best tonics. Everything is impelled toward the beautiful in its own way." And that was a quote from his book, Himalayas, Abode of Light, page 33. Okay, in the time that's left, I'm going to talk about improvement. Solemnity and improvement are two sides of one coin. We cannot be a person of solemnity and stay the same. To be a person of solemnity is to be a person on the path of improvement, the path of perfection. People who are on the path of perfectment are those who are in contact with their spiritual nature. That's just the way it is. You know, people who want to stay the same are in contact with something that we don't even understand, those who are on the spiritual path. Maybe literally we understand it, but spiritually we do not understand it. People who are on the path of perfectment are those who are in contact with their spiritual nature. The spiritual nature is the nature of progress, the nature of advancement, the nature of evolution, of transformation, of transfiguration. They do not display the signs of ambition, but display one who is seeking to overcome all obstacles, to be filled with a yearning which irresistibly impels them toward greater heights. See how this image of the Himalayan mountains comes to mind? Impels them toward greater heights. People come to Prescott where the altitude is only 5,600 feet. In some places up to 6,000, and they can't breathe. Think of going to 27,000 feet, the Himalayan mountains, and trying to breathe on your own. We are filled with a yearning which irresistibly impels us toward greater heights. They are not afraid of difficulties, but embrace the difficulties as an important part of life. When I don't know of an Agni yogi that's ever said, I have no difficulties in my life. In fact, just the opposite. They're telling us, we're being told, not only do they have difficulties, they're not afraid of the difficulties. They embrace the difficulties, because that is what inspires us toward greater heights. So difficulties inspire us toward greater heights. So we embrace difficulties as an important part of our life. Especially for those who are traveling the path of perfection, they recognize that difficulties, the most difficult of difficulties, is the most necessary and the most desired step for ascent. Of overcoming the gravitation of the earthly currents of desire, that which causes the descent of the spirit, preventing the ascent to the heights. I'm going to repeat that. You mind? No? Okay. We are not afraid of difficulties, but embrace the difficulties as an important part of life. Those of us that are traveling the path of perfection recognize that difficulties, the most difficult of difficulties, are the most necessary and the most desired steps of ascent. Of overcoming the gravitation, the ascent of overcoming the gravitation of the earthly currents of desire. Desires which causes the descent of the spirit, preventing the ascent to the heights. In joy, in simplicity, does the one who travels the path of self-improvement experience many unexpected revelations, and that's the reward. Meditation. We'll race through this. The monthly full moon cycles provide us with an opportunity for self-improvement, especially if you prepare for each full moon to engage in certain spiritual disciplines, so you will be better able to absorb the soul energy during the time of the exact full moon contact or within the 48-hour period. Daily meditation is another method to help you in your self-improvement. Self-improvement means you must change certain things in your nature if you want to improve. What is so sad is to see, again, those first 3 years, man, you're going to meditate like nobody's business. You'll put a note on the door of your meditation room and say, "Do not disturb." 3 years later, the sign is gone, the door is open, and the room is empty. What is so beautiful for some of us, that when you've been meditating every day for 30 or 40 or 50 years, it's like being transported to the ashram, and you're sitting there in your subjective body in the higher ashram, meditating with your co-workers. That's one of those unexpected revelations. Self-improvement is the essential ingredient for evolution, for ascent. Self-improvement is not limited to our physical body, but includes the emotional and mental body as well. Today's disciples are striving to build the Antakarana Bridge, also known as the Rainbow Bridge, the bridge that allows their consciousness to function in the higher mind, and later in the spiritual triad. It takes a tremendous amount of mental discipline to build the Antakarana Bridge, but it can be done with willpower, and this is why we want to be in contact with the Lords of Shambhala, the center where the will of God is known. Is it worth the effort? For some, yes. We know from the handful of great sages and their teaching that we are not awake until we begin to function in the Buddhic body, the sphere of intuition. That's not ESP. It's not a gut knowing. It is being conscious and having built at least some of the body of intuition, the Buddhic body. In the Agni Yoga book Hierarchy, the master says, one must find a bridge to prevent the loss of consciousness and to become enriched by the higher world. Step by step and stage by stage, we construct that path. That quote, by the way, is from verse 397. Again, the book Hierarchy. One must find a bridge to prevent the loss of consciousness and to become enriched by the higher world. There is a nucleus found in the Antakarana, which is called a triangle of fire, which is formed of pure electrical monastic force. The nucleus of the Antakarana Bridge is an electrical monastic force in which the fire increases ever brighter until it produces a responsive vibration from where? The higher worlds. So what's happening is that this is where the connectivity is between the lower and the higher mind. As this nucleus is increases with electricity of the monastic force, it is. I wish I had the physics of nomenclature to explain it, but it is a very intense vibration which creates it creates a frequency, a resonance that then integrates and unites the lower and the higher. The lower is totally or almost totally purified, and the substance of the chalice begins to overflow out into the higher mind and comes down into the lower mind, and now the two are one. The mental world, this is a quote, the mental world constitutes a living link between the subtle world and the fiery world. The mental world constitutes a living link between the subtle world and the fiery world. The mental world enters as the nearest impetus of the fiery world. And that's from the book Fiery World, Volume 1, verse 84. And I'm going to have to stop there. So let me stop with this, or close this morning's talk with this quote from Fiery World 1, verse 308. It says, self-perfectment is light. Self-indulgence is darkness. One can so build one's life that each day will, as it were, be the end. See how we started this morning talking about the beginning? Now the end. But one can so illumine one's life that each hour will be a beginning. Thus one can rebuild one's earthly existence beneath one's very eyes. Only in this way will the questions of the future and the understanding of fiery perfectment become perceptible.